Welcome, Michael James, to our study circle, the first Sunday of every month. We're glad to have you here and begin now with a whole list of questions. And you've chosen this one to be the first question you'd like to talk about today. It's a brief two-part question, and it's from a fellow named Joe Grosh. And he says, "Thank you for all you do, Michael, to help us stay on the path." I just want to repeat that because so many of us feel that way and we don't get the chance to say it. Thank you for all you do for helping us to stay on the path. Joe's question is, how does one practice silence? Couldn't be more basic than that. Also, what is the nature of repeating I in relation to practice? Take it away, Michael.
Okay. In order to understand how to practice silence, we first need to understand what Bhagavan means by silence. He obviously doesn't mean just vocal silence. He also doesn't mean mental silence, because mental silence, the states of mind are constantly changing. So mental silence is not the real silence. The silence Bhagavan talks about is the silence of pure being. That is eternal silence. That is ever present. That is our real nature. So we are ever in the state of silence, but now we appear to be in some other state. The reason we appear to be in a state other than silence is because we have risen as ego. So being silent, in the sense in which Bhagavan means being silent, means not rising as ego. So how to remain without rising as ego? Bhagavan has answered this very clearly in verse 27 of Ulladu. What he says in this verse is, the state in which I is without rising is the state in which we are as that. That here refers to our real nature, Brahman, which is silence. So in order to be silent, we need to be without rising as I. Without I rising. That means here I is, the I that rises is ego. So being without the rising of ego. And then he goes on to say in the second sentence, without investigating the place where I rises, how to reach the annihilation of oneself in which I does not rise. When he talks about the annihilation of oneself in which I does not rise, he makes it clear that what he's talking about in the first sentence, the state in which I... So I was explaining the second sentence of this verse. So when he says how to reach the annihilation of oneself in which I does not rise, he indicates he implies, but what he means in the first sentence when he talks about the state in which I is without rising is not just a temporary state of not rising as ego, but a state of a permanent state. That is, every night when we fall asleep, we are in a state in which we are without rising as ego. But that is not the state he's referring to here. That's why in this verse, he talks about annihilation of oneself. Annihilation of oneself means annihilation of ego or annihilation of mind. So how to reach that annihilation of mind? He says, without investigating the place where I rises, how to reach the annihilation of oneself. This is a rhetorical question. The clear implication is that we cannot reach the annihilation of ourself without investigating the place where I rises. When he says the place where I rises, he's using the word place in a metaphorical sense. So the place where I rises means the source from which we rise as ego. So what is the source from which we rise as ego? As I said, in sleep, ego doesn't rise. What exists in sleep is only our own being. But in waking and dream, ego rises. So from where does ego rise? It rises only from our being. That is, ego is the adjunct conflated awareness, I am this body, whereas our being is the pure awareness, I am. So this false awareness, I am this body, rises from the real awareness, I am. So the place where I rise is our own being, the fundamental awareness, I am. So that is what we need to investigate. Only by investigating our own being can we attain the annihilation of the self, which is the state in which I does not rise. That is the implication of this second sentence. And then in the third sentence, he says, without reaching, which implies without reaching the annihilation of us, of oneself, how to stand in one's own state in which oneself is that. So how to be, the implication is, since our own state in which we are, in which oneself is that, is the state in which we remain as we actually are, as Brahman, as pure silence. So the answer to this first question, how to practice silence, we cannot practice silence without, that is, silence is the state in which I does not rise. So to practice silence, we need to practice being without rising as I. And the only way to practice that is to investigate the source from which I rises. In other words, investigating our own being. As Bhagavan indicated in verse 25 of Uludunaptu, 2 verses earlier, the nature of ego is to rise, stand, and flourish by attending to things other than itself, but to subside by attending to itself. So long as we're attending to anything other than ourselves, we are feeding and nourishing ego. And so the ego, as he implies in that verse, it rises, stands, and flourishes by constantly attending to things other than itself. What he actually says in that verse is, in the final line of the verse, he describes ego as a formless demon. Since it is formless, when he says it is formless, he means it has no form of its own. Since it's got no form of its own, it's got no separate existence. That is, by what he means here by form is anything that is in any way limited. That is, all forms are limited. So forms means not just physical forms, but all thoughts, all feelings, all phenomena of all kinds are forms of one kind or another. So ego is devoid, in its essential nature, it's devoid of form. So in its original formless state, it has no separate existence. So it gains a separate existence as ego only by grasping and identifying itself with a form. So what he says in the verse, he begins from the first sentence, he says, grasping form, it rises. Grasping form, it stands. In these first two sentences, when he talks about grasping form, what he implies is by identifying itself with a form. That is, as soon as we rise as ego, we project and identify ourselves as a body. We experience ourselves as a body. So this body is the first form we grasp. And when Bhagavan talks about body, he's not just talking about the physical form of the body, but as he clarified in an earlier verse of Uludunapti, in verse 5, he says, Udul Panchakosa Uru. That means the body is a form of 5 sheaths. The 5 sheaths are, I won't use the technical Sanskrit terms because it's easier just to explain it in simple English terms. The 5 forms are the physical form of the 5 sheaths are the physical form of the body, the life that animates the body, what is called prana, the mind, the intellect, and the will. These 5 make up the person that we take ourselves to be. And this is what Bhagavan refers to as body, because we never experience ourselves as a dead body. When we experience ourselves as a body, it's always a living body. And we also never experience ourselves as a sleeping body. It's always a body that seems to be awake. Even in dream, the body we take ourselves to be seems to be a waking body. So in a body that is awake, there is a mind, an intellect, and a will functioning. So these five collectively are what Bhagavan refers to as body. And this is what we experience as I when we rise as ego. So as he says, grasping form, it rises. Grasping form, it stands. That is, the ego cannot rise and it cannot stand for a moment without identifying itself with the form of a body. As soon as we identify ourselves as the form of a body, we experience so many other forms. That is, the physical form of this body is just one among so many physical objects. So when we experience ourselves as this body, we experience so many other physical forms. Likewise, the mind is so soon as we identify with the mind, we experience a myriad of thoughts, so many different thoughts, feelings, emotions, and so on, and perceptions and memories and all these. We experience all these as soon as we experience ourselves as I am this body. So after saying grasping form, it comes into existence, grasping form, it stands. In the third sentence, he says, grasping and feeding on forms, it flourishes abundantly. That is, as soon as we grasp the form of a body as I, as soon as we experience ourselves as I am this body, we become aware of so many other forms. And we are constantly attending to those other forms. We're attending to objects in the external world and to thoughts, feelings, emotion, likes, dislikes, and so on within our own mind. So this is the attending to things other than ourselves is the food on which ego thrives. Since ego is formless, whatever forms we experience, whether physical forms or mental forms, they're all things other than ourselves. They're all things other than ego. Even though ego identifies itself with some of those forms, experiences some of those forms as itself, all those things are other than ego. So the implication is, by attending to anything other than ourselves, we are thereby feeding ego. That is, the food on which ego lives and thrives is constantly attending to things other than itself. And then he goes on to say, leaving form, it grasps form. That is, since ego cannot stand for a moment without grasping form, if it leaves one form, it grasps another form. This is the nature of ego. But what happens if, instead of trying to grasp forms, as is the nature of ego, if ego tries to grasp itself, what happens? Since ego is in its essential nature is formless, if it tries to grasp itself, it will thereby subside and dissolve back into its source, as he implies in the next sentence, in which he says, if seeking, it takes flight. If seeking there means if ego seeks its own reality, in other words, if ego turns its attention inwards to see who am I, it will thereby take flight. That is, it will subside and dissolve back into its source. So the nature of ego is to rise, stand, and flourish by attending to things other than itself, to any forms or phenomena of any kind whatsoever, but to subside and dissolve back into its source by attending to itself. That is why he says in verse 27, without investigating the place where I rises, how to attain the annihilation, how to reach the annihilation of oneself. How to achieve, that implies how to achieve the annihilation of oneself. That is, it's only by turning our attention away from all other things, back towards ourself, to our own being, that we as ego will subside and dissolve forever back into the source from which we've risen. Because, and the reason for this is, ego is a false awareness. That is, as ego, we are always aware of ourselves as I am this body. But this body is not what we actually are. So the awareness, I am this body, is a false awareness. So ego is a false awareness. Since it's a false awareness, it can be annihilated or destroyed only by correct awareness. Correct awareness means awareness of ourselves as we actually are. So long as we're aware of ourselves as I am this body, we are not aware of what ourselves as we actually are. If we turn our attention inwards and thereby withdraw it from all other things, we will experience ourselves as pure awareness. Pure awareness means awareness that is aware of nothing other than itself. As soon as we experience ourselves as pure awareness, we thereby cease to be ego and remain as pure awareness, which is what we always actually are. And that pure awareness is silence. So how to practice silence? The answer is by attending to ourselves. In Bhagavan's teachings, whatever how question, right? That is it. Any question we may ask how, the answer is by attending to ourselves, by turning our attention away from all other things back to ourselves. Because so long as we're attending to other things, we are feeding and nourishing ego. When we turn our attention back towards ourselves, we are bringing about the dissolution of ego, but not just a temporary dissolution of ego as in sleep, but the permanent dissolution of ego. So the answer to how does one practice silence, since silence is our own being, we can practice silence only by attending to our own being, attending only to I am. Regarding the second part of the question, what is the nature of repeating I in relation to practice? The way this person had written I, it is within single inverted commas, I-I. This you will find a lot in English books on Bhagavan's teachings, but it actually has no meaning. It originated from a mistranslation of Tamil. That is, in Tamil and also in Sanskrit, if you want to say I am this, you simply say I this. The am is understood. Or if you want to say this is a book, you say this book. The is implied there. So, but in a sentence with just a subject and a subject complement, the copula, the verb is or am or whatever, is understood. So in Tamil, Bhagavan used the term nan, which clearly implies I am I. In Sanskrit, he used the same term, similar as the Sanskrit equivalent, aham. That means I am I. So wherever you see in English books this I-I, it means I am I. However, in some contexts, Bhagavan talked about repeating I. When he did so, he put a comma between the two I's to make it clear that he's not talking about I am I, but I. In the fifth paragraph of Nana, Nana means who am I, that work who am I. He says, even if one goes on thinking I, it will lead to that place. That place is referring to the heart, the source from which, in other words, our own being. So what he implies there is that by constantly thinking I, it will lead us back to our own being. Why is this? This is in the path of bhakti, for example, one of the most basic practices in the path of bhakti is repeating the name of God, any name of God, depending on what name of God, what name and form of God appeals to you, if you repeat that name, that is a means of keeping your mind fixed on the form that that name refers to. So if you, for example, if you're repeating Ram, 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 that helps you to keep your mind fixed on the form of God called Rama. We can also see it with any other word. If someone mentions a word, for instance, tree, the word tree immediately brings a certain object to our mind. If we say car, it brings another object to our mind. If we say apple, it brings another object to our mind. So saying the name of something will bring that thing, will bring that which the name refers to our mind. So by repeating I, it's a means to keep our attention fixed on I. In other words, fixed on our own being. It's not essential to do so, but for many people who, Bhagavan often recommended this, for people who are new to this practice and have difficulty grasping what it is. That is, when people are told all we need to do is to attend to ourselves, because people don't have a clear idea of what is meant by self, they're not able to, many people are not able to grasp what is meant by that. But if we say the word I, we know what the word I refers to. It refers to ourselves. So it's a way of helping us to fix our attention on ourselves. For example, there was a couple from North India called, they were, their family name was Khanna, and they came from Kanpur. So the husband and wife often used to come, and they would bring their whole family along with them. One day, when they were visiting, Mrs. Khanna told Bhagavan, I'm a very busy housewife. I have so many chores to attend to in the home, so I don't have any time for meditation. So how can I progress spiritually? Bhagavan said, it doesn't matter what you're doing. Whatever you're doing, go on in your mind, thinking I. Because he knew that if she tries to do so, that'll help her to keep her attention on her own being. So repeating I is an aid to fixing our attention on ourselves. It's an aid, but it's useful at first, but we can't go very deep in the practice without eventually dropping that. In Ulladu in verse 28 or 29, I can't remember which one, he says, without uttering the word I by mouth, but the word he uses by mouth can also mean by voice. So it can also imply the mental voice. So not even, it implies not only not repeating I verbally, but also not repeating I mentally, because the aim in self-investigation is to fix our whole attention on ourselves. So the word I will help us to draw our attention back towards ourselves. But at some point, sooner or later, we have to drop that word and hold on to what the word I refers to. Because self-investigation is not attending to the word I, it's attending to what the word I refers to. If someone gives you a fruit, say an apple, and says, eat the apple, we understand, but the term eat the apple doesn't mean eat the word apple. It means eat the object that the word apple refers to. So the aim in self-investigation is to attend to I. That doesn't mean attending to the word I, but attending to what the word I refers to. So repeating the word I will help us to keep our attention fixed on what that word refers to. So it's an aid to the practice. I don't know if Joe is here, but if you're here, was that an adequate answer to your two questions?
I don't think he's here. Speak up if you are. Oh, Joe Michael, are you Joe Grosh? We can't hear you because you're muted.
Yes, thank you, Michael. It was beyond what I needed. It's unbelievable. The the only when it said our self, self with a capital S, it is the pronoun our kind of misleading because the self is all as opposed to
No,
my own.
the reason I say ourself in English naturally, that is the word self. Self is essentially a pronoun. There's this word self with a capital S is a very misleading word. There's no equivalent to that word in Tamil or Sanskrit. It's in the English translation, they use this capital, but that implies that there's something called the self. There is no thing called the self. That is, the word self, some people think of it as a noun, but if it's a noun, it refers to something specific, but there's no specific thing called the self. Essentially, self is a pronoun. So what the word self refers to depends upon, like any pronoun, it depends upon the context. So in English, generally, when we use the word self, we use it in a compound: myself, yourself, himself, herself. So that is a much better translation of the Sanskrit word Atman or the Tamil word Tan than the self with a capital S, because that implies that there's some separate thing called the self. There is no separate thing called the self. That is, you are yourself. I am myself. This table is itself. This microphone is itself. She is herself. He is himself. So there's no separate self other than the thing whose self it is. So when I say ourself, I'm using it as a compound term. Because we're talking, if I say myself, I'm excluding you. If I say yourself, I'm excluding me. But we're talking about what we essentially are. So Bhagavan often uses the term we. He's not using the term we as a plural, but as an inclusive form of the first person singular pronoun. If he says I, he's excluding us. If he says you, he's excluding himself. So to make it inclusive, he says we. But since he's essentially referring to a singular we, I coin this pronoun ourself as, instead of ourselves, because that implies plural, I express it as ourself. So what I mean by ourself is myself, yourself, depending on, I mean, for you it's yourself, for me it's myself. Is that clear?
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
And Michael, we got a question from Bruce. And before we get to Bruce, real quickly, maybe other people are thinking like I am. I'm still worried about that busy housewife who doesn't have time to meditate. If she turns her attention to I continually, wouldn't she be slacking in her duties? Which is more important?
No, because the work that the body, speech, and mind need to do in order for the destiny to unfold, they will be made to do. This is what Bhagavan clearly implies in the first sentence of the note he wrote for his mother. According to the prarabdha of each one, he who is for that, being there will cause to dance. That is the literal meaning. That is, in accordance with our prarabdha, we will be made to act in such a way that the prarabdha will unfold. That is just an example I often give. Supposing it's our destiny to become a doctor. In order to become a doctor, we have to study, we have to pass exams, we have to get the qualification, we need to then gain experience by working for some time in a hospital under more experienced doctors, and slowly and eventually we get qualified as a doctor. So if it's our destiny to be a doctor, we have to do all those things. We'll be made to do those things. Made to do by whom? By he who is for that. He who is for that in that context refers to God. So God or Guru. So God or Guru will make us make our mind, speech, and body act in accordance with the prarabdha. That doesn't mean that all the actions of mind, speech, and body are actions done in accordance with prarabdha, because we are also acting under the sway of our own vasanas. In other words, we are acting according to our will. So, but many things that we want are not things that we are destined to experience. Many of the things we're destined to experience we may not want. So we have freedom of will, but our freedom of will freedom of will means we are free to want whatever we want. Freedom of action means we are free to do what we want. But though we have freedom of will and freedom of action, we have no freedom to experience anything that we are not destined to experience. So supposing it's our destiny to live in poverty all our life. So many people in the world live in poverty from the day they're born to the day they die. They're constantly in poverty. But just because they're destined to live in poverty, that doesn't stop them wanting to have more money. It doesn't stop them trying to have more money. But because their destiny is to live in poverty, however much they try, they can never be rich, because it's just not their destiny. So we have freedom of will and we have freedom of action, but we have no freedom of experiencing what we want to experience or avoid what we don't want to experience. That's all. What we experience, in other words, what is given to us to experience, is all determined by prarabdha. So so if that lady's destiny was to be a housewife, to have they had so many children, I can't remember how many children they had, but I think they had something like 10 children, and the husband was quite a prosperous businessman of some sort. They actually donated. They donated for building one of the guest houses in the ashram, in one of the guest house compounds of the ashram in those days. So because she had a big family, and she had a lot of work to do, so her work has to go on according to prarabdha. Whatever she's doing, it will definitely go on according to prarabdha. So by fixing our attention on ourselves, we don't thereby cease to do what we are what we are made to do in accordance with our destiny. So actually, because we think our life, the course of our life depends on us. I have so many responsibilities. I've got family, I've got this, I've got to pay the bills, I've got to do this, I've got to do that. We think, it seems to us that all these things depend on us, but actually they all depend on prarabdha. If we are destined to pay our bills, if we are destined to support our family, it will happen as it's meant to happen. So and as Bhagavan says in the 13th paragraph of Nana, since one Parameshwara Shakti means supreme ruling power, or supreme power, or the one power of the supreme God, is driving all karyas. All karyas means everything that's meant to happen is made to happen as it's meant to happen. So since he's driving all karyas, why should we, instead of yielding ourselves to it, be constantly thinking it's necessary to do like this, it's necessary to do like that? And then in the next sentence, he gives an analogy to illustrate this. He says, when the train is carrying all the burdens, why should we who are traveling in that train suffer unnecessarily by carrying our luggage on our head instead of putting the luggage aside and traveling comfortably. So that what he implies is everything that is meant to happen in the externally is going to happen as it's meant to happen. So if we can leave the entire responsibility of our life to Bhagavan. He will take care of everything. All he asks us to do is to attend to ourselves. If we attend to ourselves, everything will happen as it's meant to happen. Even if we don't attend to ourselves, everything is going to happen as it's meant to happen. So we have a false idea that I have to do, I am responsible for all this. That is the ignorance. Everything is happening as it's meant to happen.
Wonderful. I asked the question only because she reminded me of my mother who had 6 kids, and she was a whirling dervish from the moment she got up to
Yeah.
Very hard to think about something else. Thank you very much. It was a good answer on both counts. And Bruce in Montreal has a question.
You say it's very difficult to think of anything else. All we have to think of is ourselves, nothing else. But the trouble is we think of everything except ourselves. We attend to all things other than ourselves.
Got it. Thank you for reading it. Bruce.
Yeah, thank you, Joe, for that very good question. Obviously, it inspired Michael to respond so thoroughly. And Michael, thank you for your incredible work, and that just like your term ourself, like that quality of that decision in your translation work, to me, it rings really true, and I really appreciate that and all your hard work. I wanted to reference paragraph 20 in Nanar.
Yes.
And because you did something very similar, and you can talk about it, because I know it really closely parallels, that intention that Bhagavan expressed when he used the we term, which is so inclusive. And it was I had this little moment when I was reading that paragraph, and it was as if Bhagavan was speaking right to me personally.
Yeah.
So, and the way that you translated that, and I believe it was intentional, but it probably is closely linked to what Bhagavan, said in the Tamil. But for example, it's such a short paragraph, I could read it real quick. It's if our individual. So when I hear that, I'm feeling Bhagavan is talking to me as our. He's including me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yes.
And he's saying if our individual self rises, everything rises. So he's talking to me in a very counseling way about the manifestation of ego. If our individual self subsides or ceases, everything subsides or ceases. To whatever extent we behave humbly, to that extent there is goodness or virtue. And if we are restraining, curbing, blah, 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 subduing, condensing, contracting, or reducing our mind again, wherever we may be, we can be, or wherever we may be, let us be. So that's it. I just wanted to, along those lines of ourself, if you have some commentary on that, that would be really good.
Well, I would say, I think that's an old translation of mine.
It is.
Because he uses we. In fact, the pronoun we is not used there, but it's implied in the ending of the verb he uses in the second sentence. So he clearly says, to whatever extent sinking low we behave, to that extent there is goodness. There is we. But in the other sentences, the pronoun he uses is tan. Tan means we can take it as, in some context, we can take it as ourself. But here, I think it's simpler to just take it as oneself. So in my more recent translation, I translate it as, if oneself rises, everything rises. If oneself subsides, everything subsides. To whatever extent sinking low we behave, to that extent there is goodness. If one is continuously restraining the mind, wherever one may be, one can be. It's a very, very beautiful paragraph. Particularly that second sentence. It's very difficult to translate it into English because he uses a word there but we have no exact equivalent to. That is tarndu. It's an adverbial participle. It means, I've translated it as sinking low, but it's got a, I mean, that's the closest we can translate it in English. It implies subsiding, it implies being humble, but I mean, it implies the subsidence of ego. So to whatever extent sinking low we behave or we conduct ourselves, to that extent there is goodness. So Bhagavan's definition of what is good and what is bad, subsiding is good, rising is bad.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you, Bruce. We got two more questions here. Sudha, you had your hand up first. Do you want to voice your question to us, to Michael? And yeah, there you go.
No, actually, he's always clear, and the question that pops up just nullifies. I mean, really, there's no question. I mean, I could go on with questions, but honestly, those are all just questions and phenomena and activity of the mind. The whole goal is to shut it up. So I don't have any questions.
Okay, very good, Michael. And Sri Ram has a question for you.
Yeah, Michael, extremely grateful for you and Namo Ramana for Bhagavan to give you to us as a gift. Two questions. One is you talked about aham, and then aham. So aham means I thought. The ego is the original rising from the self, which is infinite, Satchitananda, Satchit. So the ego, and you have mentioned in other areas that the first thought is the I thought, which is the ego. And from that I thought, the multiple thoughts come, upadhis come. I thought hangs on to the upadhis. Upadhis would mean the five sheets, the body, mind, the intellect, etc. And then we generate our world, including that, the word Jiva Srishti. So the journey is going backward from the world subsiding. I think Tanmai and Padara Munnilai, Padarakai, I think you have used that.
Yes.
And then going backward, and then beautifully you just sinking low, which means subsiding of the ego, or sharanagati, or surrender of the ego.
Yes.
And then you said beautifully that when you behave like that, then the conduct is sattvic or good.
Yes.
And when the ego, let the ego arise, this conduct is bad.
Yes.
But at other places, I think I have read in Bhagavan's teaching that from his standpoint, nothing ever happened. There was no ego, there was no rising, there was no world. So is that a different worldview from a Jnani's point? Nothing happened, and he's giving us his instructions manual for people who are benighted, ignorant like us, to pull us through to his state.
Yes, exactly. That is, so long as we rise as ego, we cannot deny the existence of ego. We can say this rising ego is not real, but as Bhagavan says in verse 26 of Uludunaptu, which is very like this, the first two sentences of this last paragraph of Nana, if ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. If ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. Why he says that is because everything here refers to all phenomena. All phenomena appear to whom? They appear only to us as ego. That is, it's only when we rise as ego but we become aware of phenomena. So in waking and dream, we rise as ego and we experience this world or some dream world, whatever it is. In sleep, when we do not rise as ego, we do not experience any world. We do not experience anything other than ourselves. All that exists and shines in sleep is our own being, I am. Nothing other than that. So everything exists, or all phenomena exist only in the view of ego. So long as we are experiencing phenomena, so long as we're experiencing multiplicity, we seem to exist as ego. But if we as ego turn our attention back towards ourselves to see what we actually are, we will see that what we actually are is eternally pure being, which is eternally devoid of rising. So by investigating the source from which we've risen as ego, ego will subside, dissolve back into its source, and then it will be clear, not that there was once an ego, that ego has now been destroyed. It will be clear that there's no such thing as ego at all. If you see something lying on the ground that appears to you to be a snake, but it's not actually a snake, it's only a rope, but to you it appears to be a snake, the only way to get rid of that snake is to look at it very carefully. If you look at it very carefully, you see, oh, it's not a snake, it's just a rope. Have you destroyed the snake? No, there never was a snake there. It's only the appearance. What seemed to be a snake is seen to be a rope. Even when it seemed to be a snake, it was actually only a rope. Likewise, even when we seem to be ego, what we actually are is pure awareness. So from the perspective of when we experience ourselves as pure awareness, it will be clear to us that there never was any ego in the first place. Just like when you see the rope, you'll clearly see there never was any snake there.
That is marvelous, Michael. I have one more question, Michael.
Yes.
Michael, we've spent an hour on one question, which is great. Look for the day when we spend.
And what is that one question? A question about silence, and we've been yapping for an hour about it.
Right.
Can I ask one more question of Michael?
Yes.
I'm going to squeeze in one more question that people send to us, because usually it's my experience that people have high hopes that they're going to have their question read out loud, and we devote the first hour.
But this was regarding the last question.
That is very high hopes in this when it comes to me, because I spend so much time on answering each question.
Yeah.
This was about Prarabdha that we discussed earlier.
Now? I can't say who's talking.
Oh, it was me.
Oh, David, hold on one second, David. We're going to do this second question, and then we're going to open it up to questions from the floor. We got 30 people here, and it's fine by me if all 30 of you get a chance to ask a question. Just put your virtual hand up, and we'll get it. I see mine pop up at the bottom there. So Domingo has a question, Michael, that he sent in to us, and you have it listed here as question number 2, and it's a good one. I once saw a Ramana quote that said, "Keep your mind still. The aim of all practices is to give up all practices." If this is true, what is the point of continuing to practice self-inquiry?
Well, the first thing to be said is that there are so many so-called Ramana quotes floating around on the internet, and many of them don't correspond to anything that was recorded in the various books that were recorded in Bhagavan's lifetime. In other words, they are almost certainly quotes that have been fabricated, whether intentionally or unintentionally. The thing is, often people hear something, they repeat it. Someone else hears it and they hear it slightly differently, and they repeat it like Chinese whispers. I don't know if you know the game Chinese Whispers, when a group it's a game played by children, when a lot of people are sitting around a table, and it starts with one person who whispers something in the ear of the next person, and that person has to repeat it to the next person. By the time it's gone round the table, it's come back as something completely different, because on the way people mishear it. So a bit like that, when things are repeated and repeated and repeated, they get changed. So firstly, I doubt this. I doubt that this is actually what Bhagavan said. If it is what Bhagavan said, we would need to know the context in which he said it, and that would give more light on it. This thing of the whole thing seems a little bit questionable to me. Even if someone can point out, no, it's from such and such a page on Talks with Ramana Maharshi or from Day by Day, even what was recorded in Bhagavan's lifetime by people who were there, often there are errors in what they recorded, because if you listen to a conversation and after the conversation is over, you go and write down what you heard, you're not going to write the exact words that were spoken. What you will record is what you understood, what you remember of what you understood of what was being said. So often people didn't understand Bhagavan correctly, so they recorded in their own words what they had understood of what he had said rather than what he said. So the reason I question this is keep your mind still is not actually Bhagavan's teaching. That is the teaching of yoga. The second sutra of the Yoga Sutra defines what is yoga. In Patanjali's definition of yoga, he says yoga's chitta vritti nirodha. Yoga is the restraint or stopping of mental activity, basically it means. Bhagavan critiqued that, saying that is not practical. Atma-vichara is practical, because if you simply aim to keep the mind still, what will happen? The mind will, if you find a means to keep the mind still, for example, yoga, the yoga of the type taught by Patanjali, has a lot of techniques for bringing the mind to a state of stillness, for stopping the mental activity. For example, one of the main techniques is the practice of pranayama, breath restraint. Because there's a connection between mind and breath. If the mind is very agitated, the breath will be fast and uneven. If the mind is calm, the breath will tend to be calm. So this is used in yoga to bring about calmness of mind. So by controlling the breath, regulating the breath, it brings about a calmness of mind. And if you continue that practice to you can use breath restraint to actually bring about the subsidence of mind. That is what is called Nirvikalpa Samadhi. But as Bhagavan pointed out, Nirvikalpa Samadhi is just a state of manolaya. Manolaya means a temporary dissolution of mind, like sleep. So there's no use in bringing about that temporary dissolution. What we are seeking is permanent dissolution of mind. Permanent dissolution of mind is what is called manonasa. That can be brought about not by pranayama, as Bhagavan makes it very clear in Nana, in the 8th paragraph of Nana, he concludes, therefore, pranayama is a means, is an aid to restrain the mind, but it cannot bring about manonasa. So manonasa means the destruction of the mind, in other words, the permanent dissolution of mind. That, as Bhagavan made clear in so many places, cannot be brought about by any means other than self-investigation. Because, as I mentioned earlier, the mind is a false, what the mind essentially is ego. That is, the root of the mind is ego. Bhagavan makes this clear in verse 18 of Upadesha Undiyya. He says, Enangale manam, that is, thoughts alone are the mind. of all, implying of all thoughts, the thought called I alone is the root thought. The thought called I means ego. So why he said that is, all the thoughts of the mind exist in whose view? Only in the view of ego. So ego is the thinker and knower of all thoughts. Without ego, there cannot be any other thought. So other thoughts can be constantly changing, but the one constant thought in the mind is the thought is ego, the thought I. So without ego, there cannot be any other thoughts. So in order to still the mind or destroy the mind, that is dissolve the mind, whether temporarily or permanently, you need to bring about the subsidence of ego. In sleep is a state in which the mind is perfectly still. Why? Because ego has subsided, because it's too tired to continue its activity through, it's been active all throughout the day, it becomes tired at night and it subsides in sleep. So sleep is a state of stillness of mind. So mere stillness of mind is not our aim. Stillness of mind will result from self-investigation, but it's not the aim of self-investigation, it's a byproduct. The aim of self-investigation is to know what we actually are, because only by knowing ourselves as we actually are can we destroy ego, which is a false awareness of ourselves. Because as ego, we're always aware of ourselves as, I am this body, I am this person, which is a false awareness of ourselves, because this person that we take ourselves to be is not what we actually are. That is, we seem to be this person now, but we don't seem to be this person in sleep. So since we're aware of ourselves in sleep, without being aware of this person cannot be what we actually are. This person or body, whatever you refer to it as. So ego is a false awareness of ourselves. It can therefore be destroyed only by correct awareness of ourselves. In other words, awareness of ourselves as we actually are. In order to be aware of ourselves as we actually are, we need to withdraw our attention from all other things and fix it on ourselves. To the extent our attention is fixed on ourselves, we as ego will subside. If we fix our attention wholly on ourselves, ego will subside completely and will be dissolved back into its source permanently. Because when our entire attention is fixed on ourselves, we then experience ourselves as pure awareness. Pure awareness means awareness that is aware of nothing other than itself. As soon as we experience ourselves as pure awareness, ego is thereby destroyed. Because that is, when we as ego experience ourselves as pure awareness, ego is thereby destroyed. Because to experience ourselves as pure awareness, we must be that pure awareness. And by being that pure awareness, we cease to be this rising ego. So keeping our mind still is not what Bhagavan recommended. What Bhagavan recommended is knowing what we actually are, knowing who am I. If we know who am I, thereby the mind will be made still. But if we making the mind still our aim, if we make our aim to be making the mind still, we will end up only in a state of nirvikalpa samadhi, at best. That's the best we can achieve, which is a temporary state, a state of manolaya, which is of no use in this spiritual path. So Bhagavan didn't recommend keeping the mind still. He recommended attending to ourselves and thereby knowing ourselves as we actually are. As a byproduct, the mind will thereby be destroyed, so it'll be permanently still, but that making the mind still is not, it shouldn't be taken as our aim. And then the next sentence, the aim of all practices is to give up all practices. I doubt Bhagavan would have said like that. If he were to say anything of that sort, he would say it in a deeper way. He would say the aim of all practices is to give up the one who is practicing. In other words, ego. Well, who is doing all the practices? Whatever spiritual practices we may do, whether it's self-investigation or any other practice, puja, japa, dhyana, any type of spiritual practice, who is doing it? It's ego. So if we are investigating the reality of ego, which is the practice of self-investigation, that will lead to the destruction of ego. When ego is destroyed, all practices come to an end, because there can't be any practices without ego. In sleep, there's no ego. We can't practice anything we can't practice self-inquiry or do any other type of spiritual practice in sleep, because we as ego are absent there. So the aim of all practices is to give up the one who is practicing. And when you give up the one who is practicing, thereby you give up all practices. But if you just say the aim of all practices is to give up all practices, it's a little bit, it's not sufficiently clear. Bhagavan was always making things clear. The aim of all practices, the ultimate aim of all practices, is to give up ego, the one who is doing all the practices. That's why the only practice that will take us to the final goal, which is the dissolution of this ego, is the practice of self-investigation. Because only by the practice of self-investigation can we thereby eradicate ego.
Real quickly.
So I hope that then answers the final question. If this is true, what is the point of continuing to practice self-inquiry? Practicing self-inquiry is essential, because if we not, as Bhagavan said, if you don't do Atma-vichara, you'll be doing Anatma-vichara. Anatma-vichara means attending to things other than ourselves. That is, the nature of the mind is to always attend to things other than itself. To put an end to the mind permanently, we need to cultivate this practice of attending only to ourselves. And to the extent to which we attend to ourselves, our attention is thereby withdrawn from everything else. And thereby we as ego subside back and eventually dissolve into our source. The pure silence of being, which we actually are.
Mm-hmm. Michael, I got a question about that. It's a very quick question. You said maybe a half a dozen times, I was counting them for a while, that Manonasa is permanent dissolution of the mind. What about Ramana Maharshi? I thought he was experiencing Manonasa for the life he lived from 16
yes.
until 1950.
Well, not until 1950. We call it Manonasa from the perspective of ego or mind. But okay. Manonasa, when we actually experience Manonasa, we will find it will be clear to us that there never was any such thing as mind. So Manonasa is a term that is meaningful from the point of view of the mind or ego. But once we achieve that Manonasa, we will know that there never was any mind in the first place. So Manonasa is Bhagavan's eternal state. It's not a state that is newly attained. It is our natural state.
Very good. Kunal's got a question for you. Kunal, you left a lengthy message in the chat box. Your mic wasn't working, but now it is. Can you summarize the question quickly, Kunal, for Michael?
So in summary, he says, how do we catch where this ego rises from, right? Or where does it go before and after sleep? And essentially, like when he wakes up, how does he catch it? Or when it goes, how does he catch it, I guess?
Don't worry about catching it when you wake up from sleep. Try to catch it now. What is the place from where can ego rise other than from ourselves, from our own being? So the source from which we rise as ego is ourself, is our own beings. So investigating the source from which ego rises means attending to our own being, attending to the fundamental awareness I am. Where ego goes, we shouldn't be concerned about that. What we're concerned about is, from where does ego rise? It rises from our own being. So investigating the source from which ego rises means investigating who am I, investigating the being I. That is, the rising I rises from the being I. Not that there are two I's. I is one. In its pure condition, as just I am, its nature is just being. When it is seemingly mixed with adjuncts, as I am Kunal, I am Michael, I am whoever, that is ego. So the same I that is in its pure condition is Satchit, pure being awareness. When it's mixed with adjuncts as I am this or I am that, that is what is called ego. If ego is removed, then the pure I alone remains.
Okay, and Sudha, thank you very much for summarizing the question. I'm not sure if Kunal's here or not, but thank you all. Amy, you're next.
Kunal, you had written, can you write a reply to say whether that was clear or not? Okay, he's
You're a little bit too
satisfied.
close to the mic. There we go. Say that again, Michael.
He says, okay, thanks for the answer.
Okay, good, good. Amy, you've been patient there. What's your question?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay. Hi, Michael. Thanks for
Hi.
being here. So I'm going to continue on the thread that I've been on for months now. But
Right.
so while being in that place of self-investigation, there's some subtle things I'm noticing that are happening, and I have some questions to see where I'm at. So for a while, maybe like a couple of weeks, I found that I was constricting my body and trying to stop the ego from rising. And then it became very painful. And then I was like, wait, Ramana says this is the simplest thing, right? And so I just sat there and I realized, and this is kind of my question, is you have to accept everything. You can't resist the mind. You can't, is that, and then it almost feels easier to turn, but not that it stops, but there can't be, it feels like there can't be any resistance of the mind. And a subtle, which I have not heard you talk about or say the words so much, at least from what I've heard, is surrender, but it feels like a surrendering to everything to be able to turn to the I am.
Yes, yes. That is by, in order to attend to ourself, we need to cease attending to everything else. So holding on to ourself amounts to letting go of everything else. So Bhagavan actually defines surrender as not giving room to the rising of any thought other than thought of oneself. Thought of oneself is a way of saying that is self-attentiveness. So not attending to anything other than ourself is giving up everything. So that is, surrender cannot be complete without self-investigation, because ultimately what we need to surrender is we need to surrender ourselves. Even if we let go of everything else, if we still hold on to this this false identity, I am Amy or I am Michael, we haven't surrendered ourselves. So how to let go of this false identification? It's only by turning our attention within and fixing our attention on our own being. To the extent to which we attend to our own being, the adjunct, Amy or Michael or whatever name that is whatever we take ourselves to be, all those adjuncts will drop off, and the pure being I alone will remain.
So, I mean, my question feels like, what does that feel like? But it wouldn't have a feeling.
It wouldn't. If it's like anything, then it's not yourself. What we all know I am, but what does I am feel like? Can anyone say no? You can't. We all know, we are aware of our being, but it's not a feeling. It's something far more fundamental. A
Right.
feeling is something that we feel. So a feeling is essentially an object.
Right.
I am is the reality of the one who has all feelings.
But see,
So
I can't let
we are
go.
returning back to the source of the feeler.
Okay. It's so deep. It's so subtle.
It's so deep, yes.
It really is, because I mean, don't even, I feel like even when you say what Ramana said about letting go is there's a lot in that. And
Yes. Letting go is not easy, because we have for so long we have been accustomed to clinging. The very nature of ego is clinging.
right, I even have an egoic concept of letting go, which I try to then create. Like it's
Yeah.
Okay, I'll just keep
But
at it.
if we try and let go, what are we to let go of? If we try to let go, then our attention is on the things that we want to let go of. So we shouldn't even try to let go. All we need to do is to hold on to what we are. Thereby, everything else will automatically be let go.
Okay.
That
Amy,
is,
thank you.
since the nature of ego is grasping, clinging, we cannot stop clinging to other things without clinging to ourselves. If we cling to ourselves, if we grasp ourselves, everything else will drop off. Because those other things are not this. The person we take ourselves to be is not holding on to us. We are holding on to this person.
Yeah. And so it's also like you can't even grasp the self. There can't even be a sense of like grasping in that
Just
sense.
grasp your own being.
Right.
Yeah. Whereas my wife says, just be. that
Yes.
clarifies for me.
But how to just be without, so long as we're holding on to anything other than ourselves, we are rising. Just being means being without rising. And in order to cease rising, we need to hold on to our own being.
Yeah, great way to put it. Amy, thank you very much. Hold on to that thread. We've all been there. Time helps. The passage of time helps.
Yeah, but it's, I mean, it will continue like this till the end, because as we go deeper and deeper, things drop off, but we still haven't let go fully. So we have to just hold on to our own being more and more, and just patiently let everything else drop off.
Yeah, well put.
Could I have a quickie, Ted? Could I do a quickie?
And Sajna sent in a question that was going to be our next question. Sajna, your choice. You can let us know what you have on your mind right now, or you can go
It's
to your
it's the
questions that you
same
sent to us.
question. You can read the question. It's the same question.
All right. Do you want me to read it, or you want to say it yourself?
Yeah, I can say it.
Okay.
All right. Hi, Michael.
Hi.
My question was about the manonasha. I understand
Yeah.
it's just a confusion about the term as such. My question is, for a jnani, his ego has been destroyed,
Yes.
but thoughts do still appear to a jnani, right? Thoughts do still appear to him, even though he's
then you're still taking jnani to be an ego, because thoughts appear only to ego. That
yes,
is the problem is we take a jnani to be a person.
no,
Like
I understand.
we
But when
see. Can I just answer? For example, Bhagavan. We see Bhagavan as a person. So as a person, Bhagavan seemed to be, he was answering questions, he was doing all sorts of activities. He walked around the hill, he helped cut vegetables in the kitchen, he wrote poems and things like that. So he seemed to be a person just like us. He seemed to be thinking and seeing, hearing, everything like us. But as Bhagavan pointed out, all these activities of the jnani, so-called activities of the jnani, exist only in the view of the ajnani. That is, because we mistake ourselves to be a body, we mistake Bhagavan to be a body. And as a body, he seems to be doing all the same sort of things that we do. And he seems to be thinking and hearing and seeing and just like us. So it's our view of the jnani which is wrong. We see the jnani as an individual. That's why Bhagavan often said, jnana me jnani. That means jnana alone is the jnani. Jnana means pure awareness. Jnani means what knows pure awareness. What can know pure awareness other than pure awareness? That is, pure awareness cannot be an object of awareness. So we can know pure awareness only by being pure awareness. And pure awareness doesn't experience itself as a body or a mind, or it doesn't experience thoughts. Pure awareness means awareness that is aware of nothing other than its own being. So it's only in our view that Bhagavan seems to have thoughts and seems to be doing actions. Is that a clear answer?
No, my question was regarding, since he says Ennangale Manam, right?
Yes.
Mind is nothing but thoughts.
Yes.
And then since ego is what is destroyed,
Yes.
why not use the term ahankara nasha instead of mano nasha, if manas is nothing but thoughts?
It's essentially the same. That is, when the term mind is used, in that verse 18 of Upadesha Undiyar, he says, Enangale manam, thoughts alone are mind. Yavinum nanenum enname mulamam. Of all the thoughts, the thought I is the root. And then he ends by saying, nanenal manam, I think. That, what he implies is that what the mind essentially is only ego. So though he starts with a broad definition of mind, but mind is thoughts, he reduces it down to what the mind essentially is just ego. So he often uses the term mind as a synonym for ego. For example, when we say the mind knows something, what is the mind that knows? The mind that knows is ego. That is, we can divide mind into two parts, the subject and the object. The subject is ego. All other thoughts are objects. So the other thoughts are constantly changing. The one constant thought is this thought I, namely ego. So the mind cannot be destroyed without destroying its root. But many trees, if you cut the tree will sprout again. So if you want to cut the tree in such a way that it never sprouts again, you have to cut the root. Likewise with the mind. However much we try to stop other thoughts, like the yogis, their aim is chitta-vritti nirodha, stopping all the mental activity. But what happens? The most you can achieve is manolaya, a temporary dissolution of mind that is called nirvikalpa samadhi. But because nirvikalpa samadhi is a temporary dissolution, the mind will certainly rise again. So that's not the aim. The aim is to bring about the permanent dissolution of mind. The permanent dissolution of mind can be achieved only by destruction of ego. So whether you call it ahankara nasa or mano nasa, it amounts to the same thing.
So when you say destruction here, it's not in the conventional sense of the word destruction, but what it means here is resolving the mind into consciousness. That is, realizing that the mind is nothing but consciousness. Is that what Manonasha refers to?
Exactly. As he says in verse 17 of Upadesha Undiyar, Manatinurve maravadu chava manamenamondrile undipara. That is, when one investigates the form of the mind without forgetting, in other words, without allowing the attention to be diverted away towards anything else, Manomeno mandrile, there's no such thing as mind at all. So what is called manonasa is the recognition that the mind never existed in the first place. And we can recognize that only by attending to the manatinorube means the real nature of the mind is what it implies. So as he says in the previous verse, verse 16, letting go of all external phenomena, the mind knowing its own form of light, manatin manam tanoli uru ordale unme unuchiam. That is the real awareness. So its own form of light means its nature as its fundamental nature is awareness.
Okay. Okay. Thanks, Michael. So what the aim is to realize that all there is consciousness, and
Nothing
there's no
above
such
that.
thing as
That's
the
all.
mind. There's no such thing as the ego.
No.
Okay. Thank you.
And
Thank you.
how to realize that? How to realize that there's no such thing as a snake? We need to look at the snake very carefully. If we look at the snake very carefully, we'll see it's just a rope.
Right.
So Pambu ondrile undipara. There's no such thing as a snake at all.
Right. Right. Thank you. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you very much. I know you waited a couple of weeks to get this in, several weeks since last month. So
Yes.
very much
Thank you,
indeed.
Ted.
And Sairam, we usually take one question per person, but if you have got a short one, go ahead and take it right now.
I have a short one. Thank you very much. Mike, awesome. This is a very practical question. You talked about Bhagavan's teaching when he wrote for his mother, that whatever is ordained is going to happen no matter what you try. Whatever is not going to happen, it's not going to happen no matter how much you try to make it happen. And then you talked today about expanding on that there's two types of, there's Ichha Shakti and there is a Karma Shakti, willpower and action power. That's the free will,
Yes.
so-called, depending on our vasanas. So, and ultimately Bhagavan has said that the best thing is to do is to stay still.
Yeah.
So how
The
does
terms
it, what
Bhagavan
does it
actually
mean for
used-
practical life?
The terms Bhagavan actually used are Ichha Swatantra, freedom of will, and Kriya Swatantra, freedom of action.
Okay. So in practical life, like your own life,
Yes.
you know, you went to Tiruvannamalai, you're giving these lectures, you're teaching us, educating us. So I know ultimately you'll say that it's all Bhagavan's will that is happening through you. But for us, sadhakas, we live by day. I have to work in, you know, hospital, see patients and take care of my family and so on. Is there a role of Ichha and Kriya should that be based on sadvasanas instead of vishayavasanas? And how do you live in a practical world with some planning? Or should we just, I mean, we can't just be without kriya, that's not good. How does it practically, what is the practical sadhana in teaching of the prarabdha and the willpower?
Bhagavan, what I referred to earlier in the 13th paragraph of Nana, Bhagavan says, when that one Parameshwara Shakti is driving all karyas, why should we, instead of yielding ourselves to it, be constantly thinking, ipadi sevendum, apadi sevendum. It's necessary to do like this, it's necessary to do like that. Nothing is necessary for us to do. All that is necessary for us to do is to surrender. And to surrender, we need to hold on to our own being.
But still you
Everything
have
else
to
will
go
happen
shopping.
according to prarabdha.
Right, you have to plan. If I have to go to Tiruvannamalai, I got to buy tickets, I got to make planning. So does that automatically get done? What does it actually mean in practical life?
Why do you have to plan? If it is Bhagavan's plan, you'll go to Tiruvannamalai. If it is not Bhagavan's plan, however much you plan, your plans are not going to fructify. So leave all your planning to Bhagavan. Leave all your doing to Bhagavan. Bhagavan sings in Navamani
So when you get up in the morning,
In Navamani Malai, Bhagavan sings, Anamalai Adiene Andavandre Aviudal Kondai. That is the very day, the very moment you took charge of me, you took possession of my of body and soul. That implies the mind. He took complete possession. So let him take care of everything. We have only one responsibility Bhagavan has given us, that is to surrender. He will take care of everything else. Whether we surrender or not, he's always taking care of everything. Everything is happening as it's meant to happen.
So surrender is a big part of that whole picture, isn't it?
It's essential. I mean, that's what Bhagavan's teachings are all about. Why are we investigating ourselves? Only in order to surrender ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Saram, thank you for that, Sriram. I wanted to see if
I think
else...
David Gray was saying he wanted to ask a question.
Yes, I see his fingers up there in a dimly lit room. I'm glad I saw it. I just caught it there. David, go away.
Just
go ahead. You've got
I was a bit concerted when Michael repeated about self with a capital S or small s or whatever. And there's a sentence here in Be As You Are. Seeing God or the self is only being the self or yourself. And he's got God or the self with a capital S is only being the self with a capital S or yourself with a small s. And they don't seem to be the same sort of thing as Michael was inferring. Could he just explain that?
Well, Bhagavan didn't speak in English. He could speak English. Sometimes he spoke very little in English, but Bhagavan mostly was speaking in Tamil. And in Tamil, the word for self is tan, which simply means oneself. And it's clearly it's a pronoun, because tan, depending on the context, tan can refer to he, she, it, oneself. So there's no noun. That often the word Atman in Sanskrit is taken to be a noun. But I think that's a misinterpretation of it, because if we take it to be a noun, that means there's some separate thing called the self. But that makes no sense at all, because everything is itself. That's where all this dispute between Buddhism and Hinduism arose, about whether there's a self or not. Because people reify self. They take self to be something. But
so self with a capital S, Michael, is not significant. Is that what you're saying?
It's not. I'd say it's a mistranslation. There is no self other than yourself.
Right.
When the Vedas say Tattvamasi, you yourself are that.
Right. Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Yeah.
I will dismiss.
Because otherwise we think of if we think of the self, then it seems to be something other than ourselves, something to achieve. But there's nothing other than ourselves for us to achieve. It's only ourself. Know thyself. It's ourself we need to know, not any other self.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you.
Michael, the confusion comes for a lot of people, especially for me, when the illusory mind, body, Ted, who thinks he's self, is thinking and he's aware in the illusory mind, body, Ted, as opposed to or differentiated by the I am feeling of self with a capital S.
But this person, Ted, doesn't think anything. What is thinking is the I, but is aware of itself as I am Ted. That is ego. Ted is Jada.
It's the one and only self. It's the one and only self. It's the same self.
It's the same. There's only one I. That one I, in its pure condition, is what we actually are. When it's mixed with adjuncts, as I am Ted, that is ego. That which is aware of itself as I am Ted is ego. But what that thing, if that I that is aware of itself as I am Ted turns its attention away from Ted and away from all other things, back towards itself, it will see that what it actually is just the pure I.
That helps. Thank you. That really made it clear. Amy,
we'll get day by day, there are a couple of places where Dave Rajamudhi has recorded something of course, he uses the term the self, which is a bit confusing. But what Bhagavan essentially said is the same awareness, when turned outwards, is called ego. When turned back towards itself, is called self.
We've got 30 people here. Let's time's winding down. Amy, I'll get to you as soon as I ask for anybody else to come up with a question. Who I know some people had their hands up and maybe they got tired of waiting and they pulled it back down. Anybody who has a question for Michael now, just speak up. Don't have to put your hand up. Just let me know who you are and you have the floor. And if we do have time, I'd get
I
to
have a real quick question.
Who's speaking? Yes, go
Fran.
ahead. Francis, I see you there.
Good to see you both and everyone. Michael, it's an honor to see you, and thank you so much for the years of grace. Just a question on the Path of Sri Ramana, Book 1. If I'm doing mantra just twice a day, just to kind of really, in addition to self-inquiry and you know, and using the name of God, but while I'm doing mantra, I know it's associated with riding a bicycle away from the destination. But if I'm releasing, if I'm just using mantra to still and then let go, almost like hitting a gong and letting the gong, the sound go away, and then it leads me into just being. Is that okay? I've never asked questions on the Saturday from London, but I always wanted to ask you that, and being that there's a little opportunity here, I just wanted to slip it in. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Bhagavan will never say it's not okay. If that's what you feel inclined to do, that's fine. But we should if we want to follow Bhagavan's path, we need to remember what is essential. What is essential is attending to ourselves. So even when you're attending, even when you're doing japa of a mantra, you can be fixing your attention on yourself. As Bhagavan wrote in the second instruction he gave to Kaviranta, if one repeats a mantra, if while repeating that mantra, if you attend to the source from which that mantra arises, the source of the mantra sound, mantra dhvani, there the mind will subside. So what is the source from which the mantra is arising? It's arising only from you. So attending to the source from which it rises means attending to yourself, and there the mind will subside. So even while doing that mantra japa, rather than attending to the mantra itself, try to attend to the one who is doing who is repeating the mantra.
Yes, it stops. The mantra stops, and then there's
it drops off.
No thing. There's nothing.
Or the more we are drawn to Bhagavan's practice of this essential practice of self-attentiveness, all other practices naturally drop off.
This is why it's the little brother, because it's externalized, the Om.
Yes, yes. And what for those who don't know, Bhagavan sometimes said, Bhagavan often said, the first and foremost name of God is I. Even Om is second to it. So sometimes he said, I is the elder brother, Om is the younger brother. So if you want to repeat a name of God, the best name of God to repeat is I. Francis, but rather than just repeating I, just being I is what is our ultimate aim.
Francis, does that help?
Yes, that's wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, we have just enough time for the two questions with the hands up. There will be second questions for them. One last call for anybody else with a spontaneous question. Just speak up now. All right. I'll give you one more second. Fine. Amy, keep it brief. And what's your next question?
Okay. So another thing that's confusing is I have a mind that wants to investigate. So when you say that Ramana says, okay, so if someone has a snake, you're going to tell them to look at the snake.
Yeah.
Right? what does that exactly mean? And you're talking to a mind that wants to investigate all day long the snakes. So what does that exactly mean? If I know it's not a snake and it's rope, I just move to like, but if it is something that hooks me, how long do you, I mean, what does that mean exactly? Does that make sense, Michael?
Well, yeah. Okay. But obviously the snake is here just an analogy, but just like if you look carefully at a snake, what seems to be a snake, you will eventually see that it's a rope. And you cannot be convinced that it's not a snake until you see that it's a rope, until you have a clear perception of rope. Then only the false perception that it's an ego, sorry, that it's a snake. The snake, the false perception, this is a snake, can be removed only by the correct perception, this is a rope. Likewise, when we're investigating ourselves, now we who are investigating our ego. It's only as ego that we investigate. So we seem to be ego, but if we look carefully at ourselves, we will see that what we actually are is just pure awareness. Since we are pure awareness, we were never ego.
Oh, wait. So when he says investigate, he's not saying investigate the delusion that's appearing as a snake and go in and understand it. He's saying investigate, it's the ego.
Investigate in this case, to investigate the snake, what must you do? You have to look at it carefully. Looking at it carefully, you see it's a rope. Likewise, we have to look at ego carefully. But we're not looking with our eyes, because ego is not an object, ego is the subject. But looking means attending. So merely attending to our to I is all that is intended, all that is required.
Okay.
Okay.
Now I seems to be ego. If we attend to it keenly enough, we will clearly see that it is just Satchit, pure being awareness. And therefore was never ego. There never was any such thing as ego.
Right. So I would guess that Ramana would not say analyze your mind.
No, not analyze at all. Of course, and in order to understand what the practice is, a little bit of analysis is necessary at first. Because when we first come to this path, we seem to be this body and mind. So a certain amount of analysis is necessary, that is conceptual analysis, to understand, but we are not this body or mind. Because only when we understand what we are not, will it be clear what we have to attend to. We're not to attend to the body, we're not to attend to the mind, we're not to attend to anything other than I alone.
Okay. No,
so
that
the analysis is just to get the initial understanding.
Okay.
We need a little bit of analysis, just because otherwise we'll be attending to the wrong thing. If we take ourselves to be the body, attending to ourselves means sitting in front of a mirror and looking at ourselves. That is not what, because that's attending to something other than ourselves. This body is something other than ourselves. This mind is something other than ourselves. So all we have to attend to is not to any object, but only the subject. Not anything known, but only the knower.
Yeah. We're going to, Sajna, we're going to go to you next for your second round of questioning. But before we do that, a quick scan of the 30 people who are still here. Raise your hand or speak up, either one, if you have a quick question for Michael. Okay, I don't see anybody. So, Sajna.
Yes. Hi, Michael. When you say put your attention on the self, what is this attention? Is that the power of the mind, or is that Chit Shakti? What is attention?
What is it? Attention is basically a focusing of our awareness. When we
would that be the mind?
Can I'll just say, that is, when we rise as ego, we project all this. We experience so much multiplicity. But we have a power to focus our awareness on one thing or one set of things to the exclusion of other things. So, for example, supposing you're reading a very interesting book. If the book has really caught your attention, you may be sitting on a crowded train, so much noise and things may be happening around you. There may be people quarreling somewhere nearby. You block it all out because your attention is wholly on the book. So what attention means is just a focusing of our awareness on one thing or one set of things. So rather than focusing our awareness on any object, we need to focus our awareness on the subject. So we need to be aware of the awareness itself. Be aware of nothing other than that which is aware.
So then the attention is not the mind. It is.
Well, no, it is the mind. I mean, often we use the word mind in the sense of attention.
Okay.
Her whole mind is on the book she's reading.
Right, but
or in a class, in a school, if a child is looking out of the window, the teacher said, "Put your mind on the essay you're supposed to be writing." So we often, and Bhagavan uses the term mind in that sense. When he defines what he means by self-investigation, he says, Sadakalamam manate atma-vilvetirapatikutan atma-vichara mendrupaya. The name Atma-vichara is only for always keeping the mind on oneself. Keeping the mind on oneself means keeping the attention on oneself.
Okay. I asked because the self is beyond the mind, right? So how can we use the mind?
That is what I said. If we think of the self, but as soon as we talk about the self, we're talking about something that has nothing to do with us. You don't attend to the self, attend to yourself.
Okay. Okay.
This term, the self, is very misleading because it gives the impression of something unknown, something other than ourself. There is no self other than oneself, other than ourself.
So when you put the attention on ourself,
Yes.
on self, is that the same as awareness of awareness? So in that case, it's
because
not the mind, right?
What I essentially is awareness. That is the first question asked by Shiva Prakasham Pillai to Bhagavan was, Swami Nana, who am I? Bhagavan's answer was Arivenan. Awareness alone is I. Later, for his own clarification, Shiva Prakasham Pillai added most of the rest of what's now in the second paragraph of Nana, but that wasn't actually said by Bhagavan. That was added by Shiva Prakasham Pillai for clarification. Bhagavan's actual answer was Arivenan. Awareness alone is I. And then Shiva Prakasham Pillai asked his second question, Arivin Swarupam Edu. What is the nature of that, or Enna? What is the nature of that Arivu, that awareness? And Bhagavan said, Satchidanandam.
Thank you, Sajna.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. And a quick follow-up to that, Michael. I've always wondered about this. Satchidananda, whether Ramana uses or not, it's kind of immaterial, but we define all that is as being awareness and bliss. And then the question is, if there is nothing else, no one else, no thought, no mind, no world, no cosmos, what is that awareness aware of?
Aware of itself.
Yeah, but does it need
the problem is we because in the waking and dream state we are aware of so many things, we take awareness of things to be the real awareness. Bhagavan distinguished two types of awareness, which in Tamil he called Sutatrarivu and Sutarivu. Sutarivu, the literal meaning is for pointing out awareness. That is, well, how I translate it in English is transitive awareness. That is transitive in the same sense that verbs are transitive and intransitive. Awareness is transitive or intransitive. So transitive awareness is object knowing awareness. The awareness of anything is transitive awareness. But the awareness that we actually are is pure intransitive awareness. It's not awareness of anything, it is just awareness.
It does beg the question.
That's why it's called pure awareness, because it's awareness without any object or any content.
Yeah. I mean, I thought it was a silly question to ask you, but as I asked it, I saw people here shake their heads in agreement because it does sound contradictory. You've got this gift.
Because why it sounds contradictory, because we think of awareness as awareness of something. We overlook the fact. That's why most people believe that there's no awareness in sleep. Because we're not aware of anything in sleep, but we are aware, we're clearly aware I am. Mm-hmm. Otherwise we couldn't know that when we wake up, we say, I slept. That means we're aware of having been in a state in which we were not aware of anything.
Very good.
So we can say we were aware of our being, but even to say this is where language fails, because our being cannot be an object of awareness. So we're just aware I am in sleep.
Yeah. Actually, we're being called to abandon language in a manner of speaking.
Yeah. Like that's why Bhagavan said ultimately the ultimate teaching can only be silence. Yeah. Words can only be pointers, but the ultimate truth can be revealed only by silence. Why? Because the ultimate truth is itself silence. Because what Bhagavan means by silence is pure being. Because pure being has no rising. It's ever achala, it's motionless. So it's the state of eternal silence. It's the silence that underlies everything.
That gives greater meaning to what, he's not a friend of mine, but I've interviewed him on our Sojourns podcast. He's a professor at Sai Baba's University in Prashanti Nilayam in Puttaparthi, India. And when I interviewed him, he's pretty far along, and I think of him as being awakened. There's 1,000 interpretations of what that means. But he said, where I am now, whatever it is, the state has been enhanced by the best advice I've ever heard from my teacher. And I said, okay, I'll bite. What is the best advice you've ever heard from your teacher? This teacher, Sri Sadhu Sai Baba. And he said, Baba told me one day out of the blue, I was going into the weeds too deep in all of my analyzations of who I am. And to help me, his advice was, go home now and take every book on all your shelves about spirituality, including my books, and every book, and put them in a big bag, walk them down to the Chitravatri River and throw them in. Do not read anymore. Put that time into silence, which I hear you saying with a stronger voice over and over.
Yeah. But if we, that is, Bhagavan also said that reading too many books is not useful because it's just scattering our attention. But focusing on a few essential books like Bhagavan's own original works is a support to us in this practice. But the books are no substitute for what those books are pointing at. What they're pointing at is at ourselves. So the books are useful as a support. But for that, we don't need a lot of books. The same simple books, Uludu Napadu Nana, such books, if we read again and again and again and again and again, it's constantly encouraging us to go within. And the more we go within, the more depth of meaning we will see in Bhagavan's words.
Wonderful.
So I wouldn't go so far as to say ditch all books, but be very selective in what we read. Don't read. reading and that is, Bhagavan said, what's the use of reading without limit? We need to grasp the essential message, which is that we need to turn within.
Which we cannot.
And then we need to put it into practice.
Thank you,
And turning within means turning back towards the silence of being. So we come back to the original question, which is how to practice silence by attending to silence, which is our own being.
And I thought I thought that would be the one question you wouldn't want to comment on because it seems so obvious, yet it's not.
It's not. It's not. It's it is obvious in a sense, but it's very deep and subtle. So we need to understand it. But everyone says that there's so many people who say, isn't it true that Bhagavan's highest teaching is silence and that self-inquiry is only a second teaching? They've completely misunderstood. That is, when Bhagavan says teaching is silence is the ultimate teaching, he doesn't mean that silence is some method superior to self-investigation. Silence is the ultimate aim. Silence is our real nature. Self-investigation means investigating that silence, which is our own being.
And investigation can be more than allowing that self-investigation of who we are bubble up to the top of our consciousness by sitting in silence and allowing that to happen.
But merely just sitting in silence means what? We're trying to silence the speech or silence the mind. That is not the silence. That even when the mind is active, the silence that Bhagavan talks about is ever the underlying reality.
Say that one more time.
Silence is like the cinema screen. Whether pictures are projected on it or not, the screen remains unchanged. Likewise with silence. Silence is the eternal reality. Silence is our own being. Self-investigation is attending to that silence that is our own being.
Well, let's put an amen to it for today. This has been wonderful.
Silence is humility.
Yeah, humility is a word.
Yes, well, yeah. Humility is the state in which I doesn't rise. So
Exactly.
that is silence, yes.
And is that what Michael Bhagavan said, that it should be nirantaram, 24/7, no matter what you're doing?
Yes.
You're
yes.
still self-inquiry. You could be cooking or doing whatever, and still you are doing self-inquiry.
He said nirantara swarupa smarana. If one, nirantara swarupa smarana means unceasing self-remembrance. In the 11th paragraph of Nana, he says, until one attains swarupa, if one holds fast to uninterrupted self-remembrance, swarupa smarana, adu andre podam, that alone is sufficient. So that's all we need to do, to constantly remember our own being.
Yeah.
Remember the silence of being, which is ourself.
Well, I'm glad we're ending it this way. You can never hear that enough. And it's been important, a very important 2 hours. It went all too quickly. Thank you again, Michael. I'm going to leave the last minute for anybody else to give you a shout out for their gratitude for you being here. Since 2021, every Sunday of the year, for which I'm in your debt as much as anybody else can be.
We have no words. We have no words, Ted, to thank Mike.
It's Team Bhagavan. Team Bhagavan.
I've been very stingy, Ted. You're attributing far too much to me. You say I've been here every Sunday for 4 years or 3 years or something. I've not been here every Sunday, only once a month. I'm very stingy with my Sundays.
Every month on the first Sunday of the year. That's quite remarkable by itself. Of course, it'd be fun if you came every Sunday as well.
Oh, I'm far too stingy for that.
And for the new people who are here, you're welcome to come any Sunday, because we spend the other 3 weeks of every month reading with great pleasure Ramana's teachings and then discussing them with the emphasis on discussion as well as his rich words. So thank you all. The last minute is for anybody who wants to just say goodbye to you. Mike, Michael. I hope you hear their heartfelt, loving concerns for you and your teachings that you bring us every month.
Very grateful.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone, for
Michael.
your questions.
Thanks,
Thank you, Michael. Namo
Thank
Ramana.
you
Namo
all.
Ramana. Namo Ramana.
Much
Thank
love.
you, everyone.
Much
Thank
love.
you for all your questions.